Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, a fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy ordained queerdo with a fascination for all things cycles, symbolism, and patterns.
And I'm Moonkittee, your queer femme, poly kitchen witch, and proud geek. Today's topic is solar system magic.
Speaking of cycles
Right. The
and
biggest cycle of
patterns,
all.
it's the one that we are deeply entrenched in and cannot escape because we are on the third rock from the sun.
Exactly. There are so many things that influence around, again, not just in astrology, but so many things that we thought it might be
Oh,
fun
yeah.
to talk about the solar system and solar
Yeah.
system magic and how that relates to everything that we do.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see like planetary symbols related to different tarot cards.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it brings you into deeper knowledge with astrology to
Mm-hmm.
understand the planets and their archetypes and their personalities and, their personifications or whatever you want to call it. And they just have their own kind of vibe and
Mm-hmm.
energy, which then can be a part of your magical practice, should you so
Right.
choose.
Mm-hmm. And again, talking about cycles and patterns, a lot of these things, whether you believe or not in astrology, there is often a strange coincidence if you are looking historically as to things that happen when certain celestial bodies happen to be in certain places in the sky. So as things come back around, those cycles come back around. You hear the phrase "history repeats itself." Oftentimes, history repeats itself in similar ways when there are similar bodies of planets in similar locations in the sky, shall we say?
And that 100% goes back to recognizing patterns, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
sometimes neurospacey brains like to do that a lot. So we tend to be drawn to these kind of things, whether it's manifested as astrology or astronomy,
Mm-hmm.
because both are kind of the studying similar things, the movement of the planets. Just astrology goes a little bit deeper and wants to glean meaning from it,
Mm-hmm.
where astronomy is a little bit more scientific, where it's just
Astronomy.
measuring. Yes. And so we call it solar system magic
Mm-hmm.
because, well, we revolve around the sun.
Mm-hmm. That sun is that central guiding force. It reflects
And
on
also
us.
life force. Literally, there
Mm-hmm.
would be no food for us to consume if we were cut off completely from the energy of the sun. In some ways, if you were to cut out the middleman of, digesting food for your energy, you could say we get our energy from the sun.
Mm-hmm. In the current corporeal bodies that we have.
Yep, as a
Yes.
third rock from the sun that's revolving around the sky with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so of course, something to be said that everything is from our perspective here on Earth because
Mm-hmm.
that's where we are currently
Right.
in life. Yes. I hope it'd be amazing if we're talking to people who aren't on Earth, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not within
That
my
would be
knowledge
cool.
set yet. Yeah, that'd be amazing. I'm like, if you are listening, please leave us a comment, give us a
Yeah,
like,
exactly. We're not yet broadcasting
subscribe,
live
and
from
follow.
Mars.
Hey, one day it could happen. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
So yes, everything is from our perspective here on Earth. And one thing I found really interesting when I was looking into some information around, the planets and their archetypes is
Mm-hmm.
um, the first, two that tend to get talked about most, aside from, like here we are on Earth, is the luminaries, which is the moon and the sun, and how they kind of have these divergent or reflective
Mm-hmm.
aspects to one another. So the luminaries of the planets
Mm-hmm.
is the sun and the moon.
Right.
And
And we
that's why
just
everybody talks about their sun sign.
Right, and we just did a whole episode a few episodes back on moon magic. So again,
Yep.
there's that idea of talking about that moon aspect, and this is in some ways the solar aspect companion to that, though it goes a lot
Yep.
long further than just the sun when we're talking about things. So
Everything the light touches.
everything the light touches. Right. So we're talking about the sun. It's again that
Hmm.
central guiding force. It's reflected on the other heavenly bodies, and that's how we see them in the sky. Because again, that starlight is the reflection of our sun on those planets as they bounce back to us, and we see them perceive them in the sky at that time. So, like we talked about, you just mentioned with the moon reflecting that back, same
Hmm.
thing with how the light from those planets is reflected back to us on Earth as we see it. And
Yep.
the way it bounces off and reflects back, that's what's going to filter the different solar energetic vibrations, shall we
Hmm.
say, the things, and it filters back. That's what causes the different aspects of each planet and how you see it in your birth chart.
And I love talking about like this astrology or planetary stuff because it's kind of like the microcosm, macrocosm
Hmm.
dynamic of we're really are we talking about these big things out in the universe that are moving, or are we talking about the human psyche, or are they a reflection of one another,
As above, so below.
right? So when we think of that, the sun being like the main energy source
Hmm.
that illuminates all of these other interactions that we see, of these, and some that are, we've had to perceive with
Hmm.
different instruments. So like the ones that we saw with the naked eye, they're kind of called like the personal planets. And then, so which kind of define like you as a person. And then some of the like beyond the asteroid belt, the stuff that we really need to like have scientific instruments to see,
Hmm.
they kind of become like deeper. They show reflections of like things that are deeper in our psyche because they're like the outer planets and the
Hmm.
outer bodies. So it's all very cool when you think of it as the macrocosm, microcosm
Hmm.
reflection, and you can get some deep wisdom in how that interacts.
Deeper out, deeper in. When you're thinking of the further you go
Exactly.
out, the deeper you're going, or we're talking about the psyche. Um,
Yes.
so,
So
so,
the of course then the sun is the thing that's very obvious.
mhm,
It's a lot of people's personality traits they can tend to really relate to where their sun sign is in the zodiac. And the zodiac again are like different filters that are placed on this energy that's out in the sky. And they also have different archetypes, and I'm sure we've talked about them. And if
mhm,
we need to talk about them more, we will another time because this is about the planets. But the
right,
thing is, the planets are the movement, they're the verb, they're the dynamics
mhm,
that we can observe. So they're filtered through all of this, celestial energy.
mhm,
But they're cool because they move around and we
right.
can track them.
And like you said, you mentioned the sun and our sun signs, which is again that your zodiac sign. A lot of us will know our big three: our sun, our moon, and our rising sign. Sun, like you said, that's your zodiac sign. Your moon sign is again that reflection of where it
Hmm.
was. The moon was in the sky at the time of your birth, which has that kind of reflective aspects of the sun, just like moon magic kind of tends to does. And then your rising sign as well. And
And the
that,
thing about the moon is that there's always a shadow aspect to it
mhm,
because there's always a dark side of the moon. But yes, the rising sign, where the horizon was at the time of your birth,
mhm,
which is constantly moving because the earth is constantly turning.
right. So, and each of those has different things. So, sun being overall personality,
Hmm.
moon, the reflective shadow qualities and things that be there, and the horizon, where your life is going, what your life path can go, or what people see from you when you're
Hmm.
going.
The mask we wear
Hmm.
will often be our rising sign.
So, we want to talk about the planets themselves. And in addition to, if you've ever done your birth chart, you know your big three, your sun, moon, rising. But if you've ever done a birth chart, you will see that there's so many other things in it. All of the planets will be in a birth chart if you are doing an
Hmm.
astrological birth chart. There will be different asteroids. There will be different placements in different zodiac signs. And there's a whole bunch of things that all kind of tie in together as to where these different bodies are at different points at the time of your birth, which then could potentially affect the energetic vibration of how your life can um, play out, but also the choices and things that you may necessarily need to make and be aware of.
So one of the things that I like about astrology charts is I kind of subscribe to the belief that we chose this life. for whatever our reasons, our motivations, our karmic debt, whatever, motivated our souls to choose this life here on Earth school. It's been like a philosophy that I've really adhered to over the years that we're here to learn on a soul level. There's no graduation. Sometimes souls come back, so maybe we forget that we've chosen this life.
Hmm.
Sometimes when our soul manifests into material, we're meant to forget everything that comes before and after that. But there are there are clues that are left in the universe, patterns that we can pick up on, information that we can gather that helps us truly come into deeper knowing of who we are and who we're meant to be and what we're meant to do with this life thing that we've got going on here. I don't think life is completely pointless. I mean, some people can be
Mm-mm.
very flippant and just think there's no point to it. I don't know if it's free will, choice, destiny, or what, but I think it's like some amalgamation of all of those things. And I think that we leave ourselves clues like the astrology chart that we can dig into and be like, oh, that's why I am the way I am. That's okay to be the way I am. And I love how affirming it can be, even if it
Hmm.
can tell you about something like a shadow aspect of yourself that you were taught to not love. You can lean into embracing that. So I just love these I see like they're little clues into like, consider this about yourself. How about you consider this about yourself? And I can only digest a little bit at a time because otherwise it
Hmm.
gets really overwhelming. But I always find deeper self-gnosis through
Hmm.
digging into these kind of things. Because they're all about, like, again, different aspects of the human psyche.
Hmm. Exactly. And it's really interesting when you think about looking at your own time of your own birth chart. It's going to be different from everyone. And it's going to be different from two people who are born at the exact same time if they're born in different cities. Because that's
Right.
also going to make a placement of where the sky is shifts from any given point in time. So it's really
Well, and it,
interesting to think about that because you have all of these things that even though you can have two people born at the exact same time and they may have slightly different traits depending on where they were born.
mm-hmm. Well, and that's also interesting that you say that because the inner planets move faster and
Hmm.
we observe their movements more. We talk more about their movements, like being retrograde or not, because they, a constantly changing force. So, that adds into the variety of, human personalities that we can get out of all these combinations. But then the outer planets kind of move at a generational pace.
Hmm.
Every, big amount of years, they go into a different sign sort of thing. So then we can also kind of see like these flavors of generations
Hmm.
and why they are the way they are. Is it because of historically what was going on, or could it also be the planetary influences that they had where Pluto was in this sign and now it's in this sign kind of
Hmm.
thing? So it's just a really fascinating way to kind of dig into the things we think.
Right. And depending on what aspect of the planet is, where it is in each particular sign, not only can it affect if it's say, Mercury is currently retrograde in Gemini, that can be one thing and that it's affecting everyone on a global level, but where your Mercury sat at your birth chart can also be a secondary level for how that's influencing you as well as things are going. So there's two aspects in a double kind of layer as you're thinking of some of these things, or we're talking about planets going retrograde or something else.
And as we like to say, the rabbit hole always goes deeper. So,
Always.
but for now, we'll just talk about we'll introduce you to them as like their personalities, their
Hmm.
archetypes. And we were talking a lot about the sun because he's out front and center,
Hmm.
and often seen as like kind of the father figure, I would say,
Hmm.
the luminary.
Right.
Big energy, very ego. A lot of us can derive a lot of identity through our relationship with the sun sign where it was when we were born.
Hmm.
What else? What other aspect, like personality aspects of the sun, would you use to describe the vibes? Warm, obviously.
I mean, to be warm, energetic, it's that spark. To me, I think
Mm.
of the sun as that spark of your spark of personality, your spark of that thing that is the general conception of
Well, and
where you
also
want to go and who you want to be or who this soul has decided it wants to be on this cycle.
it's kind of like a dictator of patterns too, right? Because it dictates our hours, our day, daylight versus nighttime. But also our seasonal cycles are related to the sun and
Hmm.
how we move in relation to the sun. So in a way, it's also like one of the main reasons we have cycles and patterns to our seasons
Hmm.
and our how we spend our time or how we allot time is also based on how we perceive the sun moving across the sky or the earth rotating in relation to where the sun is in the sky. I
Hmm.
always like to think about that because I love going back to it feels like the sun is rising and setting. However, it's really the earth that's moving.
Hmm.
I always like to remind myself because, perception versus reality.
Hmm.
But yeah, the sun he's a big guy. He's very important. And,
Hmm.
he's very much kind of like the daddy aspect. And I know that this might be like kind of getting out of order, but I want to bring up the moon in relation to that because if the sun is like the daddy aspect of the planetaries, then the moon is definitely like the mother
Hmm.
aspect. The more
Right.
gentle, softened light, illuminated by the sun, but has her own shadow
Hmm.
aspects. And the moon influences emotions and water, has a ruling over water. So I always think, very like high priestess kind of energy if we want to talk like tarot. Yeah, the sun and the moon, they make kind of like a different, they're different than the other planets.
Hmm. Absolutely.
One is we go around the sun and the moon goes around us,
Hmm.
speaking as a collective who lives on Earth.
Hmm.
So, but then closest to the sun, we have
Mercury.
Mercury, which is very much related to our cerebral experience,
Hmm.
what we think, how we communicate.
Mercury, of course, being named for the god of the message. It's a
Yep, how we
communicator over travel, over aspects of that. How do we get information from point A to point B? Internet, what kind of
clearly
contracts are we signing?
with wings on our sandals, right? That's how we get the messages. That's the psychopomp, the Hermes, the one that can bring messages from different realms, from the
Hmm.
underworld or the overworld, the heavens to the earth to the middle world. Yeah, and travel.
Hmm.
So, very much like travel in all its manifestations. So flight and float
Hmm.
and vehicle Mercury bless, And that's also it being, again, one that's closest to the sun. It orbits the sun faster. We observe a lot of movement with Mercury.
Hmm.
Um, and we talk about it going retrograde like all the time because it
Right.
does it like 3 times a year.
Hmm.
We will be able to perceive it moving backwards in the sky, which it doesn't. It does not move backwards. It's our perception because you have to think about in relation to where we are.
Hmm.
Mercury goes retrograde and has a deep, like at that point, people say don't sign contracts, don't buy new technology, like just kind of put it off if you can, or just really think about things, don't fly off the handle, really reconsider communication if there seems to be miscommunication happening, being like, oh, Mercury's retrograde. I need to like work harder on making sure that I'm clearly understood here. So yes, Mercury has a very, he gets a lot of attention
Hmm. And
for
where
good reason.
Mercury is in your birth chart can also affect how your communication style comes across innately. So, for example, I have a Mercury in Capricorn, so that communication tends to be very steadfast, tends to be a lot of information. I tend to overanalyze, overthink, and speak as I'm saying out. And a lot of that comes with that's where my Mercury sign was at the time of my birth. And that impacts how my because it was in the zodiac sign that's around this earth centric, path worn, very steadfast kind of characterization of the zodiac. That tends to be where my communication style lies. So if you're talking about this for you, knowing where your Mercury sign is can also affect where how your communication style tends to be.
Yeah. And if you know it, like go ahead and leave it in the comments and tell us
Mm-hmm.
where your Mercury is in your birth chart. So mine is in Gemini, which Mercury is actually they're exalted together. They like each other. Gemini and Mercury, very, very good vibes together. But that makes me chatty,
Mm-hmm.
gives me the gift of gab. It means I can take in a lot of differing ideas. I can hold, differing ideas to have some truths in them without having to have the one true way
Hmm.
isms. And I like to communicate. I'm a
Hmm.
talker. This is why I don't do short form internet. I like to talk too much. So I don't know how to get my ideas across in 1 minute, but I can do it in 20.
Right.
So yes, that is very much Gemini Mercury placement. And also that, when we're talking about astrology, again, as I've said, the rabbit hole goes deeper because you could also look at what house they're in, but we're not going to do that
Yeah,
this
we are
time.
not talking about houses on this podcast. That is
But
a
we
whole
just
other
want to,
thing that neither of us are qualified to talk about. We may have someone in if we can to do that, but neither of us are qualified to talk about houses. We're just talking about the basic planets right now.
yep, so we can get to know them. So after Mercury, we have
Venus.
matters of the heart. So we go from matters of the
Yes.
mind to matters of the heart.
So Venus
She
is, of
is,
course, about the values of love, beauty, your aesthetic taste, a little bit of your romance and seduction styles, perchance.
mm-hmm.
All of those things that deal with the goddess of love,
And
Venus
it
or
doesn't always have to
Aphrodite.
be romantic or passionate love.
No,
It's just how we love, how we let ourselves feel,
exactly. Goddess
what
of
kind of
love
relationships we're drawn to.
does not necessarily mean romantic love. Love has many
Yeah.
forms.
Yep.
As we talked about in our Queer Love Magic podcast a few weeks ago, same thing.
Yep.
Love has many forms, and this is how you deal with that concept of love, is where your Venus sign tends to direct you towards.
Yep. Yep. Love and beauty and aesthetics.
Hmm.
And yes, high femme. I always think of her as high
Hmm.
femme. When we're talking about like the planets and their personalities, I always like to picture, so many of them are named after mythological figures for
Hmm.
reasons.
Right.
So where I just think of Hermes as kind of like a twink pretty boy.
Hmm.
Aphrodite's the high femme, the very,
Hmm.
loving to be adored and loving to pour adoration onto others and loving to beautify things.
Hmm.
Very Glinda.
Yes. And with the top three, I should say your Mercury, your Venus, and even your Mars, they tend to be very close to where your sun sign is because the
Oh,
planets, because they rotate so fast, because they're going around so fast, it's usually it's either within your same sun sign or the one before or the one directly after.
I'd never thought about that or heard that, but
Hmm.
both my Mars and Mercury are in Gemini, and I'm a, June Cancer, so at the end of
Hmm.
June. So that's like right,
Yeah,
right in
because
line with.
they spin so much faster than the Earth and the rotational circuit around there. You're, again, those two are going to be either your sign or the one directly below before, or sometimes the one after. But I think it's mostly just your sign or the one directly before.
But no, I can say not always because definitely my Mars is in Libra, which
Right,
is
which is
so
the one
it's
after.
but we're getting further out,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
So
Interesting.
something to be aware of and keep in mind. If you're not sure, it's you can look up the traits of both of those, and it's probably going to be pretty close.
Yeah. So then what is Mars?
Mars, of
Because he's
course,
next, right?
because
Again, very
he's next.
masculine.
Mars is the god of war. He is your motivation. He is your drive. He is your assertiveness,
Power,
aggression, power, all of that kind of aspect of how
action.
you are see yourself in action.
Yep. So I think about, we went from the intellect to the
Hmm.
heart, and then the power is like our drive,
Hmm.
which would, also be like our sexual drive or our drive for survival and, for earning, for creating resources or resourcing ourselves in the world.
Hmm.
So, what we do. So often when you meet someone out in the outer world, I don't know, this isn't always necessarily true for us neurodivergent and queer people, but so often in the world, you meet someone and they say, "What do you do? What do you do for a living?" That's kind of like a Mercury Saturn connection because Saturn's another thing with like the karmic,
Hmm.
destiny stuff. But, what do you do with your time? What do you put your energy into? What do you put your power into?
What drives you?
What drives you? So again, I mentioned mine's in Libra, so definitely connecting with others and justice and communal drive and trying to leave this world a better place than where I found it,
Hmm.
maybe? What about you?
And
Where's your Mars?
my Mars is in Sagittarius. So my drive is about exploration. It is about adventure. It is about seeking out new information. That drive for
Yeah.
knowledge, that drive for curiosity, all of that aspect comes through with my Mars being in Sag.
So we can kind of see how all of those planets are often called like the personal planets.
Hmm.
Because they definitely have, we all have like a kind of a personal relationship with these aspects of our psyche.
Hmm. What is the next planet, of course?
Jupiter,
Jupiter. And it's
larger than life.
larger than life. Jupiter is your
Big.
luck, your opportunities, your expansion.
Hmm.
What are you going to do? How big are you going to live your life? How big are you going to take risks? Are you going to look for opportunities? How expansive are you willing to be?
Yep. And when you're ready to broaden your horizons and open your mind and the thing I love about Jupiter when we're talking about imagining them as personifications is somebody once told me Jupiter's like Santa Claus. And I just love seeing him as a big jolly old guy that really wants to bring us gifts or point out our gifts, the gifts
Mhm.
that we carry. Do you know where your Jupiter is?
My Jupiter is in Taurus.
Or ass.
Taurus. So again, if I'm looking at that idea of
Hmm.
expansion and luck and opportunity, Taurus is the bull, but also there's a lot of hedonistic, shall we say, qualities to Taurus that likes living the good life, that likes
Mm-hmm.
that there's a material aspect, but there's also this enjoyment of food, of pleasure, of the
I was
earthly
gonna say,
things that bring you joy.
I was gonna say Jupiter and Taurus is bougie.
Yeah, could be a little
I
bit of
love
that.
you. So my Jupiter is in Scorpio, which I find very fascinating. Also because it's in the 12th house and it's with my moon. My moon is also in Scorpio. This makes me think about how I lean into the heavy work of supporting people through emotional
Hmm.
transformations and grief, and I'm not afraid to talk about death and, you know, make that a real conversation that people often in our culture at least skirt around. They don't really
Hmm.
want to discuss death or it gets kind of taboo in some ways, and I'm like, no, it's not taboo to me. You can come talk to me about it. So I think about Jupiter in Scorpio, where I'm very expansive in that transformation, in, supporting people through their life transformation kind of
Hmm.
things.
And then after Jupiter comes Saturn. Saturn, if Jupiter is Santa Claus, Saturn is absolutely the opposite. It is your strict dad figure who's regulating everything for you.
He's like, he's gonna cut you off if you don't get a job.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. He is the
Saturn,
taskmaster. He's associated with your karmic patterns.
your
He's your karmic,
responsibilities.
yeah, responsibilities and stuff. Yeah. You're gonna have fun, fun, fun till Saturn takes the credit cards away.
Hmm.
No.
Exactly.
But he's the thing about Saturn that I always find fascinating is he's like the ruler of your destiny. And while here's my little rant about this, um, we're born in a culture where you, as you're growing up, you're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're meant to, throughout your education, choose a career path and dedicate your life to that career path. So you then choose what further education you need or what job skills and training that you need. And you're supposed to know what you want to be for the rest of your life. Well, guess what? That's not actually how your soul is here to operate. You are given multiple, some people are given one destiny. And more often than not, we're given multiple destinies. And I bring this up because you can look into this thing called like the 27 Club. And this happens to a lot of people where their soul will either mature past their first Saturn returns or it won't. And when it doesn't, I kind of look at that beautiful life as having had one destiny. And you can point to a lot of famous people who died around 27, 28, twenty
Hmm.
nine before they turned 30. There's a long list of them. Like I always remember Janis Joplin was one of them. And it's funny now that I'm like way past that age.
Hmm.
Back then when I learned about them and I was younger, I was like, oh, they're in their prime, they're in their peak in their life, and then they die. But they were given a magnificent one and only destiny sometimes.
Hmm.
So a lot of people will talk about their Saturn returns because Saturn has like a 28, 29 year
Hmm.
cycle to come back to the point where it was in the sky when you were born. And a lot of people who go through that age of 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, it can, it can kind of span a bridge this
Hmm.
maturing, but you go through a life change and suddenly sometimes like if you were going to college in your early 20s, you wake up and you kind of just like lose the passion for what it was that you were going to do with the rest of your life and you decide to go a different route or
Hmm.
you decide to go back to school because you want to take a different career choice. So Saturn can come in and wrap back around and bring you on a whole new journey.
Hmm. Almost everyone that I've ever talked to, once they've crossed that period of time, if you look back, you don't think about it as you're going through it because unless you know about this thing, you don't think about it because it's just, oh, there's new choice, new path put in front of me. But almost everyone I know who
Has
has
had
crossed
some
that
major
threshold has
changes.
had some major change that hit their life between 27 to 32,
And we
and
blame
that had
Saturn for that.
dramatically shifted the way they looked at things, the way they what they did with their life, like you said, their priorities, all of those things shifted, and that comes with that again, that Saturn returns because Saturn is your responsibilities, and it
Yep.
is your routine, it is your time, it is all those things around
Yeah.
you.
Yep. And he's
So,
here to tell you, like, hey, you're older now, time's ticking. What are you
mhm.
doing with your life? Are you
Yeah.
following your destiny? Are you fulfilling your purpose?
Yeah, you learn some things for that first cycle. Now, where are you going to take that things for this next 27-year cycle? Because you'll get another
Yep.
one, hopefully,
Exactly.
if you
If
get
you're
to that
if
second
you're
point.
lucky, yeah. Yeah. At 56, I would say, in and
Could
around there.
be, yeah, 54. If it's 27, it'd be around 54 to 60-ish.
Right. There you go. Yeah. So,
Same cycle time.
which is so funny because as our, in our American culture, the first destiny is basically, your childhood, your education, your maturing. And then
Hmm.
your second destiny is your purpose, right? It's your job, it's your career. It's often, this is the age in which if you're going to procreate, you do.
Hmm.
Or it's you're setting up foundations for your life. And then when you get into third destiny, it's like now that you've experienced all of this, it's retirement, it's long-term goals, it's, what are you doing with, your soul maintenance and your, how are you giving back
Hmm.
to your community? So it's really fun to look at the different phases of life through the lens of Mr. Saturn over here.
Hmm. So that being said, where is your Saturn?
My Saturn sits up in Libra. What else do I have in Libra? Was it my Mars? Yeah, so
Hmm.
Saturn and Mars are sitting pretty together over in Libra,
Hmm.
which is really fun because, also with an 11 life path and Libra reminds me of the 11 because of the scales and also Justice card being 11 most often in tarot and Libra, it's all connected for in my brain.
Hmm.
So that's where my Saturn is. I'm sure, again, that harkens to the fact that I am definitely somebody who works. I actually have a lot of stuff going on in Libra, and it's in my 11th house. So it gets really into the fact that I'm meant to, be in service to my community
Hmm.
in one way, shape, or form. And I can see that throughout my life in the past and throughout my ambitions for the future, that can manifest in a lot of different ways.
Hmm. My Saturn is in Leo.
Oh.
So again, it's to me, and I can see that in the different cycles of how am I centering myself in my own story? Am I making myself the star of my own story? Am I seeking more? Am I seeking more? Am I seeking opportunities to move up, move out, be more out there, be more visible, be more in that
Mm-hmm.
kind of not limelight, but in those various aspects, whether it's career wise, whether it's just within my group of friends or whatever it may be, being being in the limelight doesn't necessarily mean you need to be a movie star kind of thing. It's just
Just
being that
allowing yourself to shine.
exactly being that's kind of
Yeah.
trying to focus and center where I know that I have this kind of desire to have people notice me.
Oh.
in that kind of Leo trait. And I have seen that in various the cycles of it. If it's just a matter of again moving up in work, moving in cycles, working on this podcast, getting these things out so people are aware of who I am, and that does tie back to my Saturn in Leo. I can see that now when I really think about it. So after Saturn, we start getting really far out. And this is where we really start getting into those generational things. 'Cause you and I were a few years apart, which is makes sense why I have a Leo and you have a Libra. So there's a little bit of
Hmm.
cycle in between. But the further out you go, the longer the cycles start taking. And like you said, with generational content, or generational eras. So the times it takes in between movement from one zodiac sign to the other starts becoming years and decades the farther you go out. And you
So
start really seeing that when you start
I,
hitting the last three.
I'm very interested to know which ones we have in common in that sense,
Hmm.
because we aren't that far apart in age.
No, not two, but we're
6.
6 years, I think, is where
Hmm.
we're
Hmm.
at on there. So when we're talking about the next planet, which would be Uranus, um, these came later because we didn't have our telescopes powerful enough to see them until much, much later. So these are much more of a newer kind of thought process. But again, the farther out, the further deep. So we've got these basics and knowledge for what impacts us on the super upper levels, so how we go deeper. So Uranus is about your individuality, it's about innovation, and it's about revolution. How are you looking at those aspects of yourself and where are they fitting with you?
Uranus is a little bit of the rebel archetype as well.
Hmm.
It's the places in which we're willing to be weird or to lean into what we deem weird. I think weird is a compliment personally. I
Hmm.
like it. So yeah, Uranus is a kind of thinks for itself kind of planet. Again, that deeper in our psyche, how we really embrace what makes us unique, what makes
Hmm.
us an individual.
For reference, my Uranus is in Scorpio.
Because mine is in Sagittarius.
So as we're coming down, I'm probably at the very tail end of the Uranus cycle where it hits right before it goes into
Hmm.
from Scorpio into Sagittarius.
Very interesting. Yeah. So, where I think it's a very interesting tie-in between us because I have other things going, I have my
Hmm.
Saturn in Scorpio and my moon in Scorpio. I have a very deep relation to Scorpio, but when it comes to my Uranus, it's in Sagittarius. So, it kind of makes me think of like how I'm willing to wear my weird on the
Hmm.
outside
That's a
because
Sagittarius thing, yes.
Sagittarius. Exactly. And it's also my first house because I have Sagittarius rising.
Hmm.
So I I don't wear makeup every day, but when I do, it's a work of art. It's gonna be worth
Hmm.
it. It's gotta be worth putting it on. Otherwise I just don't bother. But also like the way I dress. I dress for comfort, but I want to feel cute and I love
Hmm.
colors. I love being colorful. So I'm really just not afraid to wear some of my weirdness on my outside. And I also rebel against things like, standard beauty practices or that you
Hmm.
have to have this, that, like, uh, there are certain rules. One of the fashion rules that I love breaking is you're not supposed to mix patterns. Say what? Let me find the perfect mixture of patterns. They will complement each other on a color wise, but I will mix patterns. So yeah,
Whatever
that's
you
what
want to
makes me
do.
right. So and I just think that it reminds me of all of like my expression of
Hmm.
my weirdness because it's also in my first house with my rising sign.
Hmm. Makes sense. And for me, with the Uranus in Scorpio, it speaks to that darker, deeper water aspect of revolution. I don't throw it on the surface, but I'm very much ingrained in that idea of we are the revolution and we need to seek the revolution. So I'm constantly looking for and taking classes on diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, all of that kind of stuff, because there's such, not only is there a rebellion in that, because it shouldn't be, because we should all be created equal and then some, but it goes back to that idea and how I was brought up and how that affects that idea is anyone can do what anyone else can do. They may do it differently, but you can actually achieve the same thing. And trying to put these stereotypes and these ideas on one person or on a group of people is not accurate and is trying to
Just,
break, yeah, it's not just, and you
yeah.
and it's about breaking power dynamics breaking things down, breaking those kinds of rules in a
Mm.
way that,
And it being in Scorpio, that's why it's like it's you don't have to advertise it, but it's
right,
there. It's
it's
very
there.
strong, but it also makes you kind of an observer because people
Mhm.
will assume things about you that, may not necessarily be true.
I
And
guess.
you're always watching and listening to know where you feel safe and where you don't.
Exactly. No, I get a lot of assumptions made about me on a regular basis. And sometimes it is very, very fun to break them. And sometimes it is far more interesting to see where people think they're going to go with it, to find out I am not. Like you said, to observe.
So further out from our rebel planet, from
Hmm.
our little funky weird dude, we
Right.
have we have even deeper down into Neptune.
Right. And deeper, the farther we go, deeper is our dreams, our healing, intuition, and our subconscious. So we're
Oh,
peeling down those layers.
I kind of
Or,
think
sorry.
of Neptune as a blue planet, and blue being associated with water and oceans and depth.
Hmm.
For some reason, it's like Poseidon, right? The
Hmm.
deeper
Well,
depths,
that's what Neptune is. Neptune
right?
is Poseidon. He
Yeah,
is that watery
ruler of the
depths.
dreams, of the
Hmm.
subconscious, of symbolic language, really.
Hmm. Exactly. Healing, intuition, all those concepts. And I think this is where we're going to probably start matching up. And that is I have a Neptune in Sagittarius.
Yep, you got it. We
And that's
are.
where I think I want to say it's a 27-year cycle. Don't quote me on that. But again, you start getting a lot the farther out. They get there's astronomical distances between Mars and Jupiter. There's a far, far, far greater distance than there is between Earth and Mars, and it just keeps getting progressively farther out.
Yep. So then again, we're talking about we also get deeper into our psyche. So,
Hmm.
we're in the realm of the subconscious out here in
Yes.
Neptune. Not things that we're always constantly aware of, but that you have to actually purposefully shine a light on.
Hmm.
Dig deep to interpret your dreams, to solve the mysteries of, why do I keep seeing this sign or hearing
Hmm.
this message or the symbol? Neptune is definitely there to inform us, and he informs us on a generational level. I think that
Hmm.
generationally with our Neptunes in
Hmm.
Saturn, it uh we're kind of between the boomers, which
Yeah, you're a little bit Gen X. You're a little bit millennial. You're kind of
exactly.
in between that kind of
And
elder
I think
millennial,
we
younger Gen X kind of wave of
I,
people.
I feel like we have a tendency to not have to take life too seriously, and
Hmm.
that we're also here for the party.
Hmm.
um I think generationally it helps us, take some things in stride that other people could be freaking out over.
Yeah, it also tends to with it being in Sagittarius, we have a lot more independence that comes
We were
with
the
that.
latchkey kid
We're the
generation.
latchkey kid era.
We
Also,
didn't have cell phones. They couldn't get a hold of us
yeah,
constantly. They just had to trust that we would make our way home
exactly. You
somehow.
disappeared on your bike for 5 hours. You came back at dinner time.
100 that.
And I
That
know it
doesn't
sounds
happen
strange, but
anymore.
this is really something that happened
Yep.
out there. But no, it's that kind of generation of, with again, think of Sagittarius. They are independent. They are constantly looking and searching for adventure. They're looking for things. You're talking about the dawn of the internet in this era too. So
Mm-hmm.
seeking other
Yep.
ways of communication, other ways of adventure, all those other things, all of that ties into this idea of that Neptune, the intuition, following where does your intuition go? Where are you learning? Where are you being directed? All of that stuff tying into the adventurous and curious nature of Sagittarius.
Yeah, and again, there's like expansion in that
Hmm.
Sagittarius um is expanding our subconsciousness in
Hmm.
Neptune. So there's also been a lot of spiritual revolutions in
Hmm.
our generations and beyond where we are not necessarily adhering to the overculture spirituality all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, very interesting. So then we have still a planet in my heart.
Yeah, this is where we butt up against those astronomers and everything else because, of course, it's Pluto.
Dwarf,
So again,
dwarf planet.
those of us of the elder of the Gen X millennial kind of persuasion, Pluto will always be a planet in our hearts.
Look, the mythological persona that we have assigned to Pluto includes Hades, and I am not going to demote Hades.
Hmm.
All right. He
You
is
don't dismiss the god of death. Thank you very much.
Correct.
At
Which
least on an
also
astrological, magical, psychological, energetic way.
respect, respect. So the god of death, but also can also be about sex.
Hmm.
And again, once that that drive, that animalistic drive of procreation
Hmm.
or power in the world. But also where Neptune, we talked about being the subconscious, that realm in which we don't know what we don't know, but we're willing to
Hmm.
dig in and scratch the surface. Well, uh, Pluto's the planet of the unconscious. The
Hmm.
like we can't even conceptualize the things that we don't even know about
Right.
ourselves or about others or about life or
Hmm.
death. It's that kind of space a little bit beyond our conscious knowledge, but it still exists. And it's very important space, even if we can't define it.
Hmm. I don't know if we're still in this generation or not for Pluto, but currently my Pluto is in Libra.
Yes, mine
And
is also in Libra. Our Pluto was in Libra around the generations that we were born into. And that means, once again, that value on, balance and how we relate to people and
mhm,
caring about other people. And I think that our generation, where we are as kids, we grew up post revolutions, that we learned things in even in our like mainstream education that wasn't necessarily addressed as well in previous generations, because we're starting to own up to what racism has done to our country, what slavery did to our country,
mhm,
what treating people poorly does. We're some of us Pluto and Libra people are very idealistic in the sense that we do want to believe that justice is and civil rights and equal rights are all still very important things worth protecting.
mhm. And then after we go through the planets, there are in between Mars and Jupiter, there is a whole asteroid belt, which we don't talk of because they're not planets in many ways, but there are different things. And you'll hear some newer astrologers talk about, it's a newer field of work, talking about your asteroids. And these are different nuance aspects of some of the larger planets, kind of like the way the minor arcana enhances the major arcana in tarot. The asteroids take even slightly more day to day granular type of information that can go into your birth chart.
Yeah,
And
I always find it very interesting because, again, once we say the rabbit hole goes deeper,
mhm,
there are other planetary, or not planetary, but like, floating rock bodies
mhm,
circling the solar around in the solar system, and some of them are very consistently present, and also given archetypes and personalities and perceptions, and which then gives us information of places where we want to look at within our own psyches.
mhm. And
One of major one
I said, yeah, the
that
big
I
ones that tend to be aware of on most charts would be your Chiron, and that points to where we are perpetually or ancestrally wounded, so we can address our healing in our teaching. So
Yep,
Chiron is that wounded
Chiron.
healer. And again, it's about what you do and how are we wounded ancestrally? What traumas are we dealing with? What we process? How do we address our own healing?
And
Your
how do we
Chiron will
attend
point
to
to that.
those attending to those ancestral wounds too,
Hmm.
so that we're not perpetuating them onto future generations.
Hmm.
So you do want to look at the wounding in your Chiron in your chart, to really address some of the kind of healing that you can be capable of, born to excess in this lifetime. And the best thing about the concept of the wounded healer of Chiron is that it's that compassion in us who understands, like, I don't have the same wound as you, but I know what it's like to feel
Hmm.
wounded because I have this wound over here. And so it's where you can maybe start to put yourself in other people's shoes and be compassionate towards them. I know what struggle feels like. I don't know your struggle, but I am here to support you through it and help in the ways I can, because so we heal because we have once been wounded. We offer healing because we have once been wounded and hurt and also sought our own healing and had guides. So then you kind of like pay that forward, you know.
Mhm.
So that's a lot of other ones.
Yeah, another one, Juno, is also one that you may
Yes.
hear of that talks about soulmates, marriage, and family, and
So in
how
the
you
Greek it would
relate
be
to,
Hera,
yes. So the mother goddess Hera, soulmates,
goddess
how
of
you are connected,
marriage.
and how you connect with others in that kind of romantical sense or familial sense,
Union.
into
Yeah,
building a bigger family.
exactly. Yes.
And these will make sense if you think about it, because again, Juno is Hera,
Yep. And then the
mother
next
god.
one is
Pallas, which is Pallas Athena, which of course comes
mm-hmm.
to logic, intellect, and problem solving. Athena being the goddess of wisdom.
And I always think about how some of these would pair with some of the planets, and you could
Hmm.
like again with the pairing a minor arcana with a major arcana to come into deeper knowledge of. So I would see like Juno, working with Venus, perhaps like
Hmm.
turning your love into a lasting legacy of a family.
Hmm.
And Pallas Athena would work with Mercury because it's very intellect, but she's kind of beyond knowledge. She's more into wisdom, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
And then we have Ceres, which is nurturing, loving, healing. So again, it ties into some of those other aspects that you get with Chiron, that you get with Juno, but it's again also the aspect of nurturing yourself. Because again, as you dig deeper, they become a little bit more nuanced out. And same with the last one, which is Vesta, hearth and home.
Yep.
So same thing with Juno, and again that idea of a family. Where is your family residing? That hearth and home, um, in there. So those are the main asteroids. Again, those are not used by all astrologers. They're not going to find them in every birth chart, but if you do run across them, that's what they mean.
So we talk a lot about the, planets, but also where they're at in the zodiac. So if the planets are the things that are moving through the sky and around us and we
Hmm.
can observe their patterns and their movement, the sky also like has different archetypes depending on what angle you're looking at in the sky. And that's we've given them names. And that's essentially what the zodiac is.
Hmm.
And so where the planets have these archetypes and personalities, the zodiac sign that they're moving through tends to be like a filter that you put over them. So
Hmm.
the light is filtering through the zodiac into this archetypal body. And that's why, we also often talk about, well, this planet is here in, this zodiac sign in our birth chart, or even current astrology. We're like, well, Pluto's doing this thing over here between Capricorn and Aquarius, and that's why we're starting to see some global
Revolution. Yeah.
trans and transformations.
Hmm.
Yeah, which also includes death, and
Hmm.
we're seeing a lot of that, unfortunately.
It also each of those signs that we're moving through in those zodiac signs are also ruled by a planet. So as things are transitioning, as they're moving through one sign and other, each of those signs also has a general ruling planet that may be different. So again,
Exalt. So they're seen when they're in their ruling planet, they're seen as exalted in this sign, which also means that the opposite of that sign, they tend to see like more challenging. They
mhm,
tend to find that aspect more challenging. So their expression of self can be a little bit more stifled or challenged in the opposite of their ruling sign. So it's very interesting to really dive into,
mhm,
how the planets and the zodiac archetypes become friends or challenge each other.
right. And we'll go through each of the zodiac signs really quickly here.
Sure.
Number one,
Has to be
first sign,
Aries.
Aries, is
Always number
Mars.
one. Yes.
Aries and Mars. That should be a no-brainer because they are literally the same thing.
The same mythological
The
figure.
same mythological figure, yes.
So
Which is
again,
interesting
Aries is
because the
about
other
our
ones aren't, but
willpower.
this one is.
Well, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But
Aries,
yeah,
Mars.
Mars motivation, moving forward without hesitation, being not being afraid. You're going to be number one, right?
Hmm.
Aries is not afraid to step out on that limb and be the one to command the armies
Hmm.
or command your willpower.
Hmm.
Or
Lead the
so yes,
drive to
he's
bettering
very
yourself.
yep. And also I love that for us northern hemisphere folk, Aries falls in springtime because it's always feels so fitting
Hmm.
that life wills its way back into blossoming and growth after, winter season. And
Hmm.
it just gives me that Aries vibe, that
Hmm.
Mars vibe.
I love it.
So then,
And
coming after Aries, we have.
Taurus. And Taurus is
Mm-hmm.
Venus, and that is enjoying the
Yep.
good things in life. Because again,
Yeah.
Venus being that goddess of beauty, but also of enjoyment and pleasure and all of the things that come with enjoying that good aspect of life.
Mm-hmm. Liking things that are even aesthetically pleasing,
Hmm. Exactly.
And yep, having comforts, the creature comforts of life and luxuriating in the beauty of it all.
Hmm.
So then, of course, Gemini becomes,
Mercury, the
because I said
gift
the
of
gift of
gab.
gab.
Talk, 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 talk,
So
talk, talk, talk.
yep. It's also like, I always think about the human brain trying to understand itself,
Hmm.
which is a lot of what we do here in
Exactly.
one way or another. Yeah, but thoughts into expression, intellectualizing things. Uh, Mercury and Gemini are very cozy with
Hmm.
each other.
And of course, after Gemini comes,
Cancerian, because I am one. Cancer, the crab, ruled by the moon.
hmm, all that
Yeah.
watery elements. Yeah.
And well, and it's, Cancerians tend to be like the mother of the zodiac. It's beyond just our own children. We just mother everybody.
It's security. It's that sense of feeling like you're in a secure place, constancy, knowing that cancers will be there to listen, and that intuition of understanding, knowing they're going to understand. So that
Mm-hmm.
moon
Mm-hmm.
aspect is Cancer, and that's actually the
And
only one of the zodiacs that's not ruled by a planet per se, but by a moon, and it's
well,
just
a
the moon,
luminary,
moon,
right?
a luminary.
But and in contrast, what's next is Leo, height of
That's true.
summer for us Northern Hemisphere people, and they are also ruled by the other luminary, which is the sun.
The sun, yes.
Yeah.
So again, Leos like to be seen appreciated. They want to,
Yep.
they are royal. Leo's the lion, Leo the lion, the king of beasts. They are like to be seen. They have the fiery intensity, the drive. Their personality is out there. They shine through, and they make themselves quite often the center of attention.
They like to be pretty kitties, and that's
Hmm.
okay. There's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with
it's
that.
not a, none of this is a bad thing.
Nope.
About wanting to be the center of attention. They're also often very introverted, not always, or so very extroverted, not introverted. But they're very out there. Tends
On
Leos
some
tend to be
level or
out there
another. Yep.
quite often.
And so when we go in shifting into Virgo, we're going back to Mercury being another ruling planet for another sign. Because
Hmm.
although Mercury is exalted in Gemini, but also Mercury is very happy in Virgo because Virgo likes their organization and information, collaboration, and they like to be right and they like to tell people what to
Hmm.
do
Right, and this
because
is
they
kind of
know.
that flip side of Mercury having that kind of that tool tone of communication and everything else. Virgo is that aspect of Mercury, like you said, that's organized. That to be able
Hmm.
to present that information, you have to be organized about it. You
Hmm.
have to know what's going on. You have to kind of control where the flow of things are going. So it's that secondary aspect of Mercury.
Mercury
Um,
in Virgo is the one that puts the information into a contract because it
yes.
knows that that's legally binding, which ironically, we go from legally binding Virgo to Libra, which is often seen as like the scales of justice. But the thing that I always think about Libras is that they just want to be loved and adored,
And
and they
exactly.
want to be
They rep
like
beauty and
within the realm of love. So
art,
who
and
would
that
rule
is
that?
they are ruled by Venus for that reason.
Very Venus,
Again, for all this is
exactly.
scales of justice, it's justice tinged towards that aspect of love and finding the beauty of the good things. So while it's in Taurus is the good things in life, Libra is that secondary aspect of Venus where it's the beauty centric, the love to love, the love of the desire for things to be balanced, and that love is equal or love is shared amongst many. That comes out of the
Hmm.
Libra aspect of Venus.
Yep. And then we get over to Scorpio, those secretive little scorpion dudes. They like their secrets. So, what
That puts
planet
them
pairs
with
so well?
Pluto, the unconscious thread that pushes the uprising forward, the
Mm.
revolutions, all those aspects. Scorpios are ruled by Pluto.
And they don't come to play, they come to slay.
Hmm.
So,
Exactly.
Don't mess with us Scorpios. And from the Scorpio with, like the deep feeling and keeping it secrets and, all the consequences and mystery of that, we then move into our party sign.
Sagittarius. And that goes back to that idea of Santa. That is adventurous, jovial, curious, that idea of sharing and gift giving and
So Jupiter.
being able to manage to make it all the way around the world to every household in the course of a night. That's totally a Sagittarius thing to do. But yes,
That's so
it's
true.
it's a Jupiter aspect rules Sagittarius. So there
It
is a lot of
does.
that kind of that fatherly gift giving, exploratory sharing kind of energy that comes through Sagittarius.
Yep. And, they're the life of the party, right? Because they,
Hmm.
they're like that light in the winter season for us.
Hmm.
Again, speaking as a Northern Hemisphere person with our winter solstice falling
Hmm.
right at the end of Sagittarius season. Then, of course, once the party is over and the new year clicks
And
over,
you have to
or, the
realize
solstice,
all the things
you're
that you
really
need to now plan and prepare for. You get Capricorn, which of
you're
course
deep
is
into the winter time here for us. Yep,
deep
with
in
the
the winter. You've
Capricorn
got Saturn. So Capricorn, and this should make no
because
sense to
they're
any,
about
or make absolute
responsibilities.
sense to every Capricorn who's ever existed. It's self-controlled, it's rules, it's ethics, it's all of those things that's absolutely squarely fall under
It's
Saturn.
being willing to get back to work
Hmm.
after all the parties. It's getting back to work. Yeah.
Hmm.
Getting on with it. Getting back to groundedness.
Hmm.
Yeah, Capricorns. Gotta love them.
Yes. And then after Capricorn, of course, is
Our little weirdos. Our Aquarius. Aquarius being, an air sign and being very unique and kind of they're willing to think outside the box
hmm
of air signs. But the thing about Aquarius is they're also very community minded,
hmm
communal minded. They're very concerned with like where humanity is going in light of all of this.
and because of that, they're ruled by Uranus.
Yes.
Again, that
That's
community minded, big picture can be a little bit aloof until you get to know them sometimes. But it's looking at how do things relate to innovation, revolution. They're always looking for the bigger picture and where things can go
Yeah.
from that.
They want to be able to, use their unique ways of thinking to solve the big life problems for
Hmm.
the species in general, kind of big thinking. And then we get down to the deep, deep, deep waters of the deep feelers of the Pisces.
Right. And like you
Oh,
said, the Neptune is the deepest blue, deep planet. And
yep.
they're talking psyche and psychological. And again, Neptune is that subconscious, the deep waters of the subconscious that we're learning and figuring out, those hidden aspects. Those are all ruled for the Pisces, by Neptune.
So, you can see how sometimes the planets kind of work in conjunction with the zodiac signs.
Hmm.
I would love to hear about what you learn when you look at your chart as our listeners, the
Hmm.
wide you out there, and how maybe looking at a zodiac chart has helped you fall deeper in love with yourself, deeper in appreciation for, how you're wired and what your gifts and talents are maybe in this world. Because I know I talked a lot about how I kind of think of them as clues for us to
Hmm.
know ourselves better. I want to know, what you discover about yourself if you look into your zodiac chart. It's coming into a deeper understanding, but also aside from how we know ourselves, we can also work with these archetypes with, looking at what they're doing right now
Hmm.
and putting our spell work, our intentions, our willpower in alignment and in accordance with what the planets are doing, or, reaching out to like you would reach out to a specific deity to work on, like, for example, a career path shift. Who would you look up? Why don't you go look up Saturn? And what is Saturn doing in your chart? And how can you court a relationship with Saturn so that Saturn can bring you into a deeper relationship with your career path? So
Hmm.
that's one way you can work with the magic of the solar system.
Yes. So that being said, I would love to know and hear what you learned. What aspect of this was new to you that you listened going, oh, now that makes so much more sense why this happened. So I'd love to know that information.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up
Hmm.
our introduction to the archetypes of the solar system. And
Yes.
I'm just grateful and want to say thank you for listening to the Queer Witch Project. And if you like what you hear, make sure that you're giving us those star ratings or the thumbs up or subscribe and follow. And, leave us a comment and really tell us, what some of your aspects are and what they've taught you about yourself.
Mhm. And if there's a topic you'd like to know more about or an episode topic you'd like to suggest, contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, as long as it lasts, and Instagram with the handle at queerwitchproject. We upload every other week. And remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously.
Bye.
Bye.